I think that's a very self-interested comment.
Yeah,
it's really hard to unpick the fact. I mean, at the end of the day, they're weighing up more freedom and more flexibility in their economic policy versus some pre-established trading and financial arrangements. And it's like, which is, that's the trade-off. And it's kind of like, I think they are overcooking the consequences of leaving, and probably not dealing with the fact that they can still argue new terms within the EU should they stay. So I don't think, if they vote to stay, that the world's going to be the same anyway.
You see, what you said before is fascinating, because we have this vision, probably many of us, of traders as being fairly calm, sharp-minded, eagle-eyed, and there will be no change, as you're saying, in Britain's relationship with Europe for a couple of years. So why do markets get to fever pitch like this?
They just have so much, I mean, I would say from my experience in the markets, you have got a certain personality type in there anyway. So they are looking to make money from the smallest piece of news. So a bad day in finance is a no news day. So they are looking to make money in very tiny margins on large volumes. And so the smallest piece of news, that means someone might disagree with them and they can find someone to trade with, has the potential to make a lot of money. So,
I agree.
That's about it. It sounds terrible, but that's what it is.
And the cynic in me is like, reads George Soros and is like, well, he's, talking up one particular way, but you can know that he's got his traders betting the other way, and it's just complicated. And just that they love drama, they love information, they love leaks and rumours, and that's how they make their money, because they're ahead of the game, presenting themselves as ahead of the game, and helping their clients.
Yeah, but the key thing is they've got no new information that no one else has got. They know nothing more than anybody else.
Yeah,
that's why I'm saying the bookies are the ones to watch on this one.
The wisdom of crowds putting their money where their mouths are. Just very quickly on the Brexit still, as for whether cutting deals, Susan, directly with Britain would work better for us, as opposed to what Winston Peters says is the smell of an oily rag with the EU trade negotiations, what do you think? Does anyone know that either?
I can't think of any precedents. I mean, I remember when Britain left when Britain joined the EEC, it was at that stage, and it was difficult here, wasn't it? I mean, we really went through a period of time that was horrifically challenging for everybody, but we survived it, and it's kind of like, these are just contracts. We've got the TPPA. Who knows what that's going to do? There's another talk of a free trade with China. I mean, these are just contracts that influence trading contexts. They can be changed every week. So, I'm a bit of a fan of law can be whatever we want it to be.
Okay, all right, thank you. Before we go, the latest in the ongoing chronicles of what school pupils can wear and what they cannot. The senior girls at Hornby High told they were rolling up their skirts too high, and they will now, I think this is the latest in the story, receive an apology. Do you agree with that? Or do you think skirt length, stipulated in the school rules on the website, any pupil should abide by that? What is your view?
I must admit, I was kind of sick of the girls thinking, come on, just play fair. It's like, I won't say what I was really thinking, but if the guys are start mucking around with their uniform too, it is messing about with everybody's heads, isn't it? So, just kind of calm down, wear your uniform and rebel some other way would be my kind of gut reaction, really.
All right, Neil?
Well, as long as the rules are specified clearly and you sign up to it, then you kind of have to abide by it. I mean, when I was at school, girls' skirt lengths were specified and monitored, unfortunately. But for boys, the big thing was that you agreed that your socks would be up all the time, and so you got in trouble when you had your socks down. So, but you had signed up to it, or your parents had signed up to it. And it's kind of like people that go to a school that has you must have a certain length hair, and then they grow their hair longer, and they're like, well, you're crushing my human rights, and it's like, but you kind of signed up to it. So I think, if you want to wear shorter skirts or have longer hair, maybe you want to go to a different school.
Okay. So in your view, an apology was not necessary. That would be the conclusion from what you both have just said, yeah?
Yeah, the school is apologising for not enforcing its own rules.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Susan Guthrie, enjoying Dunedin, and you're flying north again tomorrow, are you?
Next week.
You're there for a while. Thank you for coming on the panel.
You're welcome.
In your busy sojourns. Neil Miller, always great pleasure to have you back on too.
It's always a pleasure, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It'll be a busy day for us tomorrow, Brexit Day. John Campbell with Checkpoint on the way.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, a man who distributed Islamic State material is forcibly pulled into the cells at the Auckland District Court, yelling as he's jailed for 3 years and 9 months. Brexit, the future of Britain in the EU or out of it. Today is referendum day. We go to Britain throughout the program tonight. A New Zealander taken hostage in Nigeria. We talked to the last New Zealander this happened to. His advice, keep calm. Dame Paula Rebstock, the State Services Commission, and serious, unwarranted and adverse consequences for a former top diplomat, improving safety on rural roads, and even after the slaughter in Orlando, US politicians appear more scared of the gun lobby than of the guns. All of that and more coming up on Checkpoint tonight. But first, here's Sharon Brett Kelly with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. A man who distributed Islamic State material that included videos of a beheading lashed out and yelled as he was jailed at the Auckland District Court today. Imran Patel was jailed for 3 years and 9 months. He had earlier admitted possessing, making and distributing the objectionable material. As he was led into the cells, he shouted to the media bench to tell the Prime Minister John Key to stop being a slave to America and get out of Iraq. A security guard had to push him through the cell doors. The court heard how Patel had 62 files on his laptop and copied some of the videos to 6 devices. He also sent text messages to 52 people containing links to a beheading video. Judge Collins said it was the first case of its kind where someone has been prosecuted for violent videos. The New Zealand man kidnapped in Nigeria is being named as Jamal Khan in local media there. 3 Australians and 1 New Zealander have been confirmed as among a group of mine workers kidnapped by gunmen during a deadly ambush earlier today. Kate Pereira Garcia reports.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has confirmed a New Zealand citizen has been kidnapped in the attack, which left a local driver dead. A Nigerian news site has named the New Zealander as Jamal Khan. He is believed to have been living in Australia. The ministry says it's in contact with his family. The men, who are believed to have been working for Perth-based mining company McMahon Holdings, were captured near Calabar in Nigeria's south. Another Nigerian and 1 South African were also reportedly kidnapped. This is Kate Pereira Garcia.
The Prime Minister John Key says it is not uncommon in that part of the world for people to be kidnapped for money, but he says the government would not pay a ransom. A former top public servant says the State Services Commission has failed to take responsibility for publishing an unfair report criticising 2 senior employees. The Ombudsman says an inquiry ordered by the Commission contained unfair criticisms of one of the public servants, Derek Leask, and some evidence did not fairly represent his actions. The inquiry was investigating leaks in 2012 about a planned restructure at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The State Services Commissioner Ian Rennie says he doesn't agree with all elements of the Ombudsman's findings. A former chief executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Neil Walter, says he's disappointed at that response.
The criticisms levelled by the Ombudsman were very serious, and they don't seem to have actually been taken that seriously by the State Services Commissioner, who continues to protest that this inquiry should have taken place and doesn't seem to resile in any way from the unjust findings that it produced.
Neil Walter. Campaigning has closed in Britain's referendum on the country's EU membership. When polls open tonight, voters will face a single question: should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? More than 46 million people are eligible to vote, including New Zealanders, Australians and Canadians living in Britain. The UK last held a referendum on its membership of what was then called the European Economic Community more than 40 years ago. A memo from Housing New Zealand reveals its plans for getting out of Queenstown. Released under the Official Information Act, the memo relates to the sale last month of one of 10 state houses. It says the town's high-profile resort lifestyle could be seen as incompatible with social housing. One social housing group says it has a waiting list of 350 people who can't find affordable accommodation. Housing New Zealand's Chief Operating Officer, Paul Commons, maintains there is no deliberate policy to exit Queenstown.
What can happen over time is in some towns and cities where housing is quite affordable, there's plenty of rental stock, and we tend to, over time, get fewer and fewer numbers, and that's just the natural way it works, So in some towns, smaller towns particularly, we do eventually exit them.
Paul Commons says there are currently only 2 people on a waiting list for social housing in Queenstown. To sport now, and a smile was all the Highlanders' loose forward Elliot Dixon could manage when he heard his name called out for the All Blacks team to play Wales in Dunedin. Dixon will earn his first Test cap on Saturday when he starts in the number 6 jersey. Highlanders teammate Liam Squire and Blues prop Orfa Tuangalati are the other 2 debutants. Dixon says his selection took him by surprise.
I was pretty happy. Looked up and saw one of the other boys looking at me, I think it was George as well, and had a big smile on my face, and then quickly put my head down, and then just thought about my roles and what I have to do on Saturday.
Elliot Dixon. The list of top men's golfers deciding against the Olympics continues to grow, with Northern Ireland's world number 4 Rory McIlroy the latest to wipe it from his schedule. Half a dozen top players have said they're not interested, including another top 10 player, Adam Scott. And now the world number 1, Jason Day, says he's undecided on whether he'll go. The Zika virus and scheduling have been cited as reasons not to attend. The former world number 1, Tiger Woods, believes the Olympic organisers have got it wrong.
I wish that they would have gone, say, the top 50 guys in the world, that kind of thing, and just done it that way. I know they're trying to only have 4 guys from each country participate, but I just wish that it would have had more quality of field, similar to what we face in major championships or the World Golf Championships or the Players. We have these top-heavy fields, and I think the Olympics really deserve that.
Tiger Woods, and that's the news.
Blowing the cover.
There'll be another Mr. Ready out there who will now be well advised and ready for the police when they attempt the same operation.
Broken promises.
We're in the ambulance driving home and we've got nothing sorted for us at all.
Bring back the bobbies.
It's not just flyby policing, it's warning, not charging policing, and trying to say that the situation's under control, and it's not under control in any way, shape or form at all.
A fair cop. Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, what a series of high-profile meth busts says about police and gang crime. And after 10, the extraordinary story of the Finnish cave divers and their secret mission to return their friends' bodies home. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from the Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Showers, some heavy, becoming isolated this afternoon, then clearing overnight or tomorrow morning. Waikato to Kapiti, including the Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms in the west, north of Kapiti, easing tomorrow and gradually clearing. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, but the odd showers spreading from the ranges today. Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, rain clearing this afternoon and fine breaks developing. Bulla and northern Westland, rain easing to showers this afternoon, clearing tomorrow, but cloudy periods remaining. Southern Westland and Fiordland, a few showers clearing later today, fine tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, rain gradually retreating to the coast and clearing overnight, fine tomorrow. Southland, mainly fine, but a few showers this evening and overnight. The Chatham Islands, rain or showers, heavy at times. It's 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharon. Busy old show tonight. Our court reporter Edward Gay is on his way from the court, where a man who distributed Islamic State material that included videos of a beheading has just been sent to jail. He yelled very angrily as he was taken out of court. We'll update that in a moment. Obviously, we're talking Brexit tonight and we're going to go to Britain very shortly. In fact, we're going there throughout the program. But let's begin with Prime Minister John Campbell saying the government will not pay a ransom for a New Zealander kidnapped in Nigeria if it's asked for. The New Zealander, 3 Australians and others were among 7 people abducted earlier today. Nigerian media are naming the New Zealand man as Jamal Khan. Our reporter Alex Ashton has the latest on this.
Up to 30 armed men attacked a convoy the foreigners were travelling in, with one Nigerian killed as a result of the attack. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says as of yet there's been no communication with the kidnappers. Mr Key says the reason for the kidnapping isn't yet clear.
As I understand, it's an Australian mining company. There was one New Zealander, 3 Australians and 1 South African. At this point, we don't know the details of exactly what the motivation is, but it's not unusual in that part of the world for the motivation to be about ransom and therefore to be looking to extract money.
Mr Key says his sympathy is with the family of the New Zealander, but the government's policy remains the same.
Our very strong policy is not to pay ransom, and the reason for that is we think that if we paid a ransom, we potentially put a bounty on the head of any New Zealander that travels to a dangerous part of the world and potentially makes the situation worse. So in the case of the New Zealand government, no, we wouldn't pay.
The New Zealander is a permanent resident of Australia. Earlier today, Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said the full details of what happened weren't known.
The Australian High Commissioner is on the scene, and we are working with the authorities, the local authorities at the highest levels. We don't know at this stage the identity of the kidnappers.
The attack took place in the outskirts of the city of Calabar in the south of the country. Shannon Sedgwick is the chief executive of the risk consultancy firm Global Media Risk.
Well, there's quite a lot of kidnappings that happen in that area, not usually of expats, but a lot of rich Nigerians are targeted. It's not usually for ideological means, it's usually for monetary means. They kidnap for ransom, and which is quite good news for those who have been kidnapped, because if the families or the governments and companies involved are willing to pay that ransom, then there's a good chance that these people will get home safely.
The men had been working for the Perth-based mining and engineering company McMahon Holdings. There's been little information from the company, although it's asked the Australian Stock Exchange to put a hold to trading on its shares pending an announcement by the company about a security incident. Australian former Senator Bob Brown played a crucial role in the release of an Australian photojournalist who was kidnapped in Somalia in 2008. Mr Brown says both New Zealand and Australia have policies of not paying ransoms.
The governments don't want to get involved in paying ransom and criminal elements because they believe that will, and there's a logic to this, they believe that may lead to the incentive for criminals to simply kidnap more Canadians or Australians or Britons or whatever it might be.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade says it's in contact with the kidnapped New Zealanders' next of kin and is seeking further information on the situation. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Quite an extraordinary story. This has happened to a New Zealander before. He too was taken after a really nasty firefight, kidnapped, taken away and held in a camp and then ransomed off. He will tell us his story, what all of this is like, later in Checkpoint. It's 30 minutes past 5. Will Britain leave the EU? It's obviously 13 minutes past 6 in the UK, and today the British people will wake up and answer that question. There are 28 countries now in the European Union. The first 6 in 1958 were Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. Just 13 years after the end of World War II, that was a diplomatic triumph. The UK joined in 1973. Romania and Bulgaria, the last 2 countries to join, did so in 2007. Leave proponents say it's become too big, too unruly, too bossy, too influential. But the elephant very much in the room has also been immigration. Remain campaigners have accused some prominent Leave advocates of xenophobia. Now, there is a very real possibility Britain will vote to leave, and today is the day that's being decided. The UK Prime Minister David Cameron made one final concerted push. Here he is in Oxfordshire, urging people to vote Remain.
The absolutely key thing tomorrow as people go to vote is to vote on the economy, to vote for jobs, to vote for livelihoods, to vote for Remain. This is a vote that is irreversible, and it's about our country, our economy and our families' future.
Remain, Leave, even Tories can't agree. As Cameron says stay at a fish market, former London Mayor Boris Johnson was saying go.
Entire fisheries controlled by Brussels. You've got the EU Commission sitting instead of us deciding how fish stocks, our UK fish, are going to be parcelled up and divvied up. So you take back control, and I think it will be a big, big moment for democracy in this country and around Europe.
In London, there were queues outside high street currency exchanges amid predictions the pound will fall sharply if Britain chooses to leave the EU in the hours ahead.
My dad phoned me earlier. He's asked me to come out and get him some euros. They're in anticipation of the dropping tomorrow because they're off to Spain for a week. So,
Britain's Post Office said overall currency sales in its branches and online were up 74% year on year since the weekend. That's a 3/4 increase.
I'm going on holiday end of August to America. I just want to get my cash now, basically in case there is a leave vote and the pound does drop significantly. I thought it'd be worth getting my dollars now. It's not a big transaction, but if the pound does collapse, then it might cost me £100. So I thought I'd get some cash now.
Meanwhile, in the English town of Boston, dubbed by British tabloids as the most European town in Britain, the immigrant community is, of course, paying close attention to the referendum. Immigration has become a central issue, sparking a debate around its impact on jobs and social services. Local councillor Jonathan Noble says those campaigning for Britain to leave the EU believe immigrants are partly responsible for long waiting lists for housing and doctor's appointments.
They're concerned really about not immigration per se, but the amount of immigration, because obviously foreign nationals coming to this part of the country, they're competing with local people for jobs. It's had the effect of depressing wages, and I've said before, it's increasing the cost of housing as well.
But those campaigning for Britain to remain in the EU say Europeans contribute way more to the UK than they take out. That's something endorsed by this expat Polish hospitality worker.
Because can you imagine that all immigrants in the 1 or 2 days have to leave the Boston? The town will die. Half of the country will die.
More than 2 million EU migrants work in Britain, making up 7% of the labour force and therefore also of taxpayers. Central to the Leave campaign has been the polarising figure of Nigel Farage, leader of the UK Independence Party, UKIP. Mr Farage takes the responsibility of fronting the Leave campaign very seriously indeed. The problem is many in the Leave camp wish he wouldn't. In short, Mr Farage serves as a kind of synonym for precisely the sort of xenophobia the Leave camp so wants to disassociate itself from. Susie Boniface has written about all of this rather wonderfully. Under the pseudonym Fleet Street Fox, she's chronicled the damage Nigel Farage has done to precisely the campaign he so desperately wants to support.
And what's happened in the months of the campaign is that Nigel Farage is now someone that the official Leave campaign have to constantly deny they've got anything to do with. So every time, the other day he stood in front of a poster which was reminiscent of Nazi propaganda with a stream of refugees pouring into Europe and saying we're at breaking point because of this, in the same way that the Nazis used posters and film footage of Jewish refugees and saying they were parasites bringing the country to its knees. And the official Leave campaign just had to say, this made me shudder, I'm disgusted, this is an appalling poster, we're not part of it, because the poster made the news, rather than whatever message about the economy or trade deals that they wanted to get out that day. So the Leave campaign are actually having to fight the fire, if you like, that Farage keeps insisting on relighting. And this plays into the Remain camp's hands, because Britain is a fairly tolerant nation. We have our moments, but we're a fairly tolerant nation. We're built on migration. Most of us really don't mind that the man down the road is not the same colour as or faith as us, so long as we all get along and he makes a cup of tea, same as the rest of us.
So has the Remain campaign been able to characterise the Leave campaign as xenophobic?
They've certainly tried to.
Right, but are they running...
And that causes them more problems, because the people who have a genuine and quite reasonable point to make, which is that, like New Zealand, we're a small group of islands, and you can't have uncontrolled immigration because eventually you fill up and people are falling off at the sides. So you have to have a certain amount of migration that's reasonable and healthy and helps the economy, which we currently sort of do have. Migrants put in more than they take out of our public services. But every time they say, oh, you're racist, oh, you're xenophobic, people who do have a reasonable point to make about immigration feel that they're being made to be called racist when they're not, and therefore they become more entrenched in their views.
Yeah, and this is fascinating, isn't it? Because some of this is big picture politics. For example, if you are a 67th generation Brit who can't get their granddaughter into the local GP, is that because a whole lot of people have arrived from Romania, or is that because there were cuts to government health services?
Well, I would say it's because of cuts, because it's a proven fact that migrants in the UK bring in £2.5 billion more in taxes than they cost us. So it's the migration we've had, which is keeping the NHS and keeping our public sector and our schools and so on afloat. It's because without them, we'd really be in trouble. 26% of the doctors in our NHS are migrants, for example. However, the suggestion that there's a lot of pressure on our services and that is causing queues at A&E, that is causing problems in schools and so on and so forth, is really as lodged in people's brains that is a fact, that is what's happening. So even in parts of the country where there aren't queues at the A&E, people are still blaming migrants for there being problems at the local A&E. They're not looking at what the facts are or aren't. They're deciding things on an emotional basis rather than a rational basis. And that's true of both sides. So there is really very little point in trying to explain this is how immigration works, this is the benefit, this is the figures, these are the statistics, because people just say, that's wrong, that's rubbish, or I think this, and they're going with their gut rather than their head.
And so at the end of all this, and I'm loath to use this word, Susie, because it's repugnant, but is there going to be closure for anyone? I mean, is anyone going to feel better after this referendum is over? Is the scab that has been packed going to heal?
Well, it's a bit like the Scottish referendum. There's been a lot of division. It hasn't been quite as nasty as the Scottish referendum, so probably going to heal better. But the issue is going to be about turnout. If there is a big turnout and there is a clear answer, say 60-40, one way or the other, then most people would probably just go with it and accept it and so on. But if it's nearer 50-50, if it's 49-51, 48-52, that kind of thing, then the side which loses is always going to feel very aggrieved, and the side which wins is, not going to feel quite as secure in what they do. And someone somewhere will point out that referendums aren't legally binding, which they're not. They're merely advisory to the government, and they're not part of the Constitution. So they could ignore it in theory, although there'd be absolute uproar if they did. And if you had a decent turnout, you'd had a clear answer, I think it would heal and it would be fine. If you've got something that's very close and there's a lot of antagonism, therefore, about the answer, you've got more issues, I think, frankly. And I personally think that if you have a vote to leave, there'll probably be a reasonable chunk of people who do up sticks. There'll be a bit of a brain drain. But it'll have to be interesting to see how it all works out if that's the case.
Susie Boniface, who's a political columnist who writes as Fleet Street Fox. Amazing to see the role the British media have played in this, particularly the newspapers. In less than an hour from now, we're going to cross to London to look at what the newspapers are saying on the morning of the referendum. Obviously, Rupert Murdoch, a big Leave man. Are his newspapers reflecting that? You betcha. Right. It's 5:23. A man who distributed ISIS material, including videos of beheadings, had to be dragged into the cells by security shortly after he was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in jail. Imran Patel appeared for sentence at the Auckland District Court for making, possessing and distributing material that included ISIS videos. He also sent text messages of links to a beheading to 52 people. As Judge Collins sentenced Patel, he turned to the media seated in the jury box and shouted to tell John Key to stop being a slave to America and get out of Iraq. A second man who visited the US consulate was also sentenced for having similar material in an unrelated case. Now, our Auckland reporter Edward Gay was in court as all the shouting was done in his general direction, and he joins us now. Edward, this is the first such case of its kind in New Zealand, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, John. Usually this charge of distributing objectionable material relates to child sex abuse videos and pictures. And Judge Collins said today that this was the first case of its kind. The court heard how Patel had 62 files on his laptop, and he copied some of these videos and images to 6 devices. And Judge Collins said he found that the copying was for a planned distribution. He also sent these text messages, and when he sent the first text message, he got actually a message back from his telecommunications company, which actually gave him a warning. And despite that warning, he sent a second message that included another link to a beheading of a person. And Judge Collins reiterated, though, to the media that Patel wasn't facing a terrorist charge. He also said that the likelihood of Patel performing a terrorist act was not taken into account during the sentencing.
So, Edward, this is very much about the distribution of the material rather than the sense that Patel was in any way likely to become a terrorist or behaving like a terrorist. He did, though. Who was he meeting with? Who was he trying to talk to? He's a very strange character, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, since these charges, he's met with senior police. He's had a meeting with actually the Deputy Police Commissioner. Also, he's been visited by senior Muslim clerics who have tried to educate him. His lawyer, Adam Holland, spoke about these meetings. He said that his client, while facing these charges, had been kept in solitary confinement for 22 hours a day, only allowed out for 2 hours a day for exercise. Now, Crown Prosecutor David Johnston was asked about this by Judge Collins, and he said that Patel had actually chosen this for his own safety. In sentencing, Judge Collins said that although the violence depicted in the videos was some distance from New Zealand, as a district court judge who has to deal with the damage done to so many lives on a daily basis, and to see this extreme violence glorified and celebrated in the way that these videos do, he said it was a real serious concern and it had to be denounced by the court. There's also, while he was being dragged from the court, he said these words to the media to tell John Key to stop being a slave to the US and to get out of Iraq. And he could also be heard yelling, "God is great," in Arabic inside the cells.
Edward Gay, who was in the court, obviously, as all this was happening. Thanks very much indeed, Edward. It's 5:26. Coming up on Checkpoint, we're back in Britain. The government announces a $600 million package targeting rural highway black spots. That's in New Zealand, obviously. And a Te Puke man living in a cabin with his sick 4-year-old son says he's desperate to find a home after 6 months waiting for Housing New Zealand to provide them with a house. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. We'd love your views on Brexit. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It's great to hear from you. Thank you all. You may actually have some opinions on this next story. Numerous flaws, significant damage to the reputation of a senior civil servant, and as a result of that, and I quote, serious, unwarranted, adverse professional, personal and financial consequences for that man. That damning language is the Ombudsman's criticising the State Services Commission and Dame Paula Rebstock over the inquiry into an alleged leak at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The inquiry cost $500,000, but such was the damage done to the former diplomat that compensation may now have to be paid to him. Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
The 18-month Paula Rebstock inquiry singled out Derek Leask and colleague Nigel Fife and said they had opposed the restructure. It said the pair had lobbied chief executives of other agencies, including then Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet Chief Executive Martin Weavers. But the Ombudsman, Ron Patterson, says the inquiry was unjust, contained unfair criticisms of Mr Leask and cited evidence that did not fairly represent his actions. Derek Leask says it was clear from the outset that he was up against the system.
We were receiving drafting which made, in our view, not a lot of sense and which was making quite unjust and unreasonable and unfair accusations against us. So it was a very disturbing process, and it did not look to us as if it was done according to proper procedure.
The Ombudsman says the State Services Commission, which ordered the inquiry, should publicly apologise to Mr Leask, reimburse his expenses and compensate him for harm to reputation. Derek Leask says the report has cleared him of any wrongdoing, and though it has been a long fight, it's been worth it.
It has been mind-boggling. I could not believe that an investigation was being done in this manner. It's been distressing, and I now feel a sense of great relief.
The State Services Commissioner, Ian Rennie, says he accepts the way the investigation dealt with Mr Leask could have been better. However, in a statement, he says he doesn't agree with every part of the Ombudsman's findings, in particular that the investigation went outside its terms of reference.
Terms of reference for investigations need to be specific enough to give clarity to all involved, while giving enough scope for the investigator to pursue information and lines of inquiry that present themselves during an investigation. Dame Paula's investigation covered a broader range of issues, including the conduct of public servants and the secure handling of information. From my perspective, those findings have not been called into question.
Neil Walter was the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade from 1999 to 2002. He says he's disappointed by the response from the State Services Commissioner.
The criticisms levelled by the Ombudsman were very serious, and they don't seem to have actually been taken that seriously by the State Services Commissioner, who continues to protest that this inquiry should have taken place and doesn't seem to resile in any way from the unjust findings that it produced.
Ian Rennie steps down as the State Services Commissioner when his term finishes at the end of this month. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says he wouldn't sack Mr Rennie if he was staying on. He says he still has confidence in the State Services Commissioner and the report's author, Paula Rebstock.
The author of the report has done a lot of work for the government before, and in my experience been thoroughly professional at what they've done. Obviously the Ombudsman's found some areas of concern. They'll need to be addressed. That's a matter for the State Services Commissioner. But as a general rule, I mean, again, we have confidence in the State Services Commissioner.
Labor MP Phil Goff says the Ombudsman's report shows that the Rebstock inquiry caused a great deal of hurt and was a colossal waste of money.
We wasted $500,000 on that, but worse still, we put two very decent, competent people through the mill, damaging their reputation and putting their families through hell. None of that was justified and demands genuine apologies from the Minister, from the State Services Commissioner and from Paula Rebstock.
The Ombudsman did not say how much Derek Leask should be paid in compensation, and the State Services Commissioner says discussions with Mr Leask are ongoing. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Well, as May told us, the inquiry, now described as containing numerous flaws, cost a total of just over $500,000. Paula Rebstock was appointed to lead the investigation in mid-2012. The investigation report was released late the following year. Given the Ombudsman determined that Derek Leask was treated unfairly and unjustly, we wanted to discuss this with Paula Rebstock, who became Dame Paula at the beginning of this year for services to the state. She didn't respond to our requests for an interview. 5:32, coming up, a memo from Housing New Zealand details an exit strategy for its presence in Queenstown. A group of Democrats staging a sit-in demanding new US gun laws. Boy, this is a fascinating tussle. Why hunger and homelessness are being called the new normal for increasing numbers of New Zealanders. And 2 New Zealand cyclists have now been confirmed to ride in next month's Tour de France. And known as here with business news. But before all of that, Sharon, Brett Kelly with the RNZ headlines.
Thank you, John. A man who distributed Islamic State material that included videos of a beheading lashed out and yelled as he was sentenced at the Auckland District Court today. Imran Patel was jailed for 3 years and 9 months for possessing, making and distributing the objectionable material. As he was led into the cells, he shouted to the media to tell the Prime Minister John Campbell to stop being a slave to America and get out of Iraq. Nigerian media have named a New Zealand man kidnapped there as Jamal Khan. 3 Australians and 1 New Zealander are confirmed as among the group of mine workers abducted by gunmen in the country's south. The Prime Minister John Campbell says it is not uncommon for people to be kidnapped for money in that part of the world, but he says the government would not pay a ransom. A former top public servant says the State Services Commission has failed to take responsibility for publishing an unfair report. The Ombudsman says an inquiry the Commission ordered into leaks about a planned restructure at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs unfairly criticised the senior public servant Derek Leask. A former chief executive of the ministry, Neil Walter, says he's disappointed at the State Services Commissioner's response that he doesn't agree with all the Ombudsman's findings. People in Britain will begin voting shortly in a referendum on the country's membership of the European Union. They'll be asked to answer a single question on the ballot form: should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? More than 46 million people are eligible to vote. A memo from Housing New Zealand reveals its plans for getting out of Queenstown. The memo released under the Official Information Act relates to the sale last month of one of 10 state houses. It says the town's resort lifestyle could be seen as incompatible with social housing. One social housing group says it has a waiting list of 350 people who can't find affordable accommodation. And those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Which is 25 minutes away. Thank you very much indeed, Sharon. We're going to have more on that Queenstown housing situation in about 3 minutes, but let's turn to business with Nona. Nona Peltier, welcome to the studio. As always, Michael Hill set the move across the ditch. What's this mean, Nona?
Oh, I tell you, it's the end of an era for Michael Hill, but the beginning of a new one. So the company has been conducting its business in Australia for some time now and decided to move their listing from the New Zealand Stock Exchange to the Australian Stock Exchange. They've been reporting their financial figures there in Australian dollars for some time.
So they're moving, they're leaving New Zealand?
Well, they have moved from New Zealand quite a long time ago. Most of their stores are based in Australia. A lot of their revenue comes from there. However, they're still a New Zealand company at heart. You'll never take Michael Hill out of New Zealand for sure. But
not out of that nice house down in Queenstown, the golf course.
I don't. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've never been there, but I've seen it on the telly.
Oh, well, I haven't, but I'm sure it's lovely.
Yeah, it is lovely.
Anyway, so the shareholders voted today to approve that move, and also the company's moving on with succession. Emma Hill, his daughter, was named as the chair last year, and today they also agreed to restructure the family's stake in the company. So they have about 53% in the company, which is still a majority stake, but they're going to take 10% of that and divide it between Emma and her brother Mark. So they've got now their own individual stake in the company. And I asked Emma if she was thinking of selling her stake, and she said no, there's no plan for that. It's just a succession plan as Sir Michael, is moving on. Yep.
First thing, for me, this Brexit thing is so extraordinary. I mean, we are potentially we're 12 hours away potentially from Britain withdrawing from the EU. Now, I know that we discussed last night the fact the bookies, who are notoriously likely to be right, are saying it's not going to happen. But what are the markets doing in advance of that possibility?
Actually, very, very little. As a matter of fact, very nervous.
Are we talking tiny volumes, not much trading going on?
Mostly sitting on their hands.
Yep.
We're talking about thin volumes. We're talking about a market that's really nervous. Potential for some sharp movements over the next little while, the next 24 hours, of course, because the polls will open shortly, just in, less than a half an hour.
Yeah.
And then close tomorrow morning, our time, local, about 9 a.m., 10 p.m. in the UK. And then, but the final result we won't see till sort of Friday afternoon. But the markets, of course, will continue to be open. The currency markets and so forth are open until New York closes, and that's on Saturday morning. So you can expect quite a lot of volatility.
And no one knows the answer to this question, Nona, and it's unfair to ask you live on the radio, but has the possibility of Brexit been priced into the pound, or is it going to be sold out of bed if Britain leaves the EU?
Again, you know what? This morning, Jason Wong, who's a currency dealer at the BNZ, and I'll just give you an example. He's been looking at the New Zealand dollar, and he's saying, and this is how much volatility is actually out there, he's saying that right now the New Zealand dollar has kind of blasted up, as a result of what's been going on. We're getting close to 72 US cents. And he says that we can expect with a Remain vote for the currency to stay around that level, but with the Leave, a 5% fall.
Holy guacamole.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
and now you think about it, that and you just amplify that when you look at the pound. So the only clean play right now is happening on the pound. That's where most of the trading is taking place. Hardly moving though in the New Zealand context, but overall the markets are nervous, definitely nervous, expecting a lot of volatility. And so where we are right now is 71.8 US cents, 95.5 Australian, 48.5 British pence. And our local market, our NZX Top 50 Index, ended up 0.6% rather, up 40 points to 6,821.
Nona Peltier, fantastic to have you with us. I look forward to discussing the reaction to Brexit tomorrow, eh?
Well,
not Brexit or not.
Brexit or Brexin.
Yeah, thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier talking business in the studio with us Most nights, it's 21 minutes to 6. A memo from Housing New Zealand details an exit strategy for its presence in Queenstown. So Housing New Zealand Brexit. Released under the Official Information Act, the memo relates to the sale last month of one of the 10 homes it has there due to what the government agency says is a lack of demand. It says the town's high-profile resort lifestyle environment could be seen as incompatible with a social housing presence there, despite a very large number of low-income service workers and overcrowding in housing in Queenstown. Here's Conan Young.
The comments have angered social housing providers in the town, including the Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust. Its executive officer, Julie Scott, says it has a waiting list of 350 people struggling to find affordable accommodation.
I just met with a family this morning and she was in tears. They've been in Queenstown since 1992. They've got 3 kids and they've got till the 22nd of August and then they've got to be out of their property and they just can't find anywhere to go. It's just heartbreaking.
Julie Scott says the only reason Housing New Zealand can claim there's a lack of demand for social housing is that the Ministry of Social Development is actively discouraging people from putting their names on the waiting list.
They're being told that because you have rental accommodation at the moment, even though you might be paying rent of $800 and you've got a net income of $1,000 a week, you still have accommodation, so therefore you won't be eligible for it.
Nikki Mason from the Happiness House Community Trust says Housing New Zealand needs to stop shirking its responsibilities. She says the lack of affordable accommodation is forcing those on modest incomes to leave the town for good.
To see long-term families move from this area is just so devastating because they're the ones that volunteer in the community, they're the sports coaches, they're the ones that their children go to school and they're so much part of our community, and to see them having to leave, I just find it extremely sad.
Housing New Zealand's Chief Operating Officer Paul Commons maintains there is no deliberate policy to exit Queenstown.
What can happen over time is in some towns and cities where housing is quite affordable, there's plenty of rental stock, we tend to over time get fewer and fewer numbers, and that's just the natural way it works, So in some towns, smaller towns particularly, we do eventually exit them.
Housing New Zealand has a modest 36 houses across central Otago, and the closest ones to Queenstown are 45 minutes down the road in Cromwell. Paul Commons says there are currently only 2 people on a waiting list for social housing in Queenstown. He says they are in the game of providing social housing, not affordable housing.
We are housing some of the most vulnerable and the highest need. They're likely not to be in the workforce. They're likely to have, significant financial pressures. They're likely to have some health issues. So, Queenstown has housing pressures in the general sense, but we're not housing typical working Kiwis who are trying to find a place to live in Queenstown.
Paul Commons says any money made from the sale of homes in Queenstown will be put into building new homes in areas of higher need. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, says people in Queenstown with jobs who can't afford accommodation are not being added to the waiting list.
Most of them are relatively transient, young people that are passing through that wouldn't meet the criteria, but all I can go by is the number that have been assessed and that are on the current register, and as I say, it's incredibly low.
Paula Bennett paid tribute to the work local housing trusts are doing in the town. For Checkpoint, Conan Young.
Let's stay on the subject of housing. A Te Puke man living in a cabin with his sick 4-year-old son says he's desperate to find them a home. Blake's 4-year-old son has a serious bowel condition which has placed him in hospital. But since January, the pair have been paying $200 a week to live in a tiny holiday park cabin with no running water inside. He spoke to Mava Moihead a short time ago.
Yeah, it's about, say, 4 metres by 3 metres at the most.
Where do you sleep?
I sleep on the bed there.
And then does your boy sleep on the couch or with you on the bed?
Most of the time he sleeps with me on the bed. Otherwise he sleeps on the bed and I'll sleep on the couch there.
Mm.
Yeah,
and there's no bathroom, no shower. You got to use the public bathroom and shower. You cook in the public cooking area.
Yeah, in the public kitchen.
Blake's home, a cabin, is humble. There's not much to see: a bed, a couch, and a sink with taps that don't turn on. He and his son moved there in January. At the same time, they applied for a Housing New Zealand home. 6 months later, they're still waiting. And what's worse is that Blake's son is sick.
Here he is reading the latest letter from his son's paediatrician.
By April, he hadn't opened his bowels for about a week. After a review in hospital, it felt necessary to semi-electively admit him for nosogastric tube insertion, clean, prep, clear out, and this was duly done in April. That was the week in hospital.
Blake says he passed the report on to the Ministry of Social Development in the hopes his son's condition will boost them up on the housing list. As far as he knows, it hasn't. He has no idea when they might find a new home. Blake says he hopes it soon because he wants his son settled before he turns 5 and starts school.
Everything depends on my baby because this bowel problem's been going on for that long now that he's 4.5 and he's still wearing nappies, and I'm trying to get him organised and sorted for school. And I want him to hit school with the most confidence. I think it's imperative. That's my main thing.
Blake gets a benefit of $390 a week. After $200 goes on the cabin, there's not much left for food, medication, petrol, and anything else that comes up. Sometimes he hasn't even been able to afford his son's medication. He says he wants to work, and has done so on and off. But because his son is sick, sometimes he has to drop everything, including work.
I was working nights, and then as soon as I finished work, I'd be straight over to the hospital because I didn't want to miss out on what the doctors had to say, because that's when they do their rounds and things like that, So I was doing that constantly for about a week or so, and then, for the whole time he was in the hospital.
Blake doesn't really mind where they go. He's asked for anywhere between Rotorua, Te Puke, Tauranga and Kawerau. The list goes on. He says he and his son just need a home. And until that happens, his boy's condition will only get worse. The Ministry of Social Development can't comment on specific cases without a privacy waiver. But in a statement, its Deputy Chief Executive of Social Housing, Carl Crafer, says health conditions are taken into account in determining the waiting list. He says the agency will continue to work with the father to identify social housing options. For Checkpoint, Marva Moayed.
The time on Checkpoint is 14 minutes to 6. More than 19 black spots on roads throughout the country determined to be very high risk will get safety improvements over the next 6 years. The government announced a $600 million package in Wellington today aimed at reducing the number of deaths on state highways. Maya Burry reports.
The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges, says safety improvements to rural highways will save lives.
The forecasting that we've seen shows that 900 fewer people will die or face serious injuries on our roads as a result of these improvements over the next decade.
Mr Bridges says the plan includes nearly all high-risk roads in 14 regions where there have been 5 or more fatalities in the last 5 years. He says it will make state roads safer for both tourists and locals. The spending will include installing side and median barriers, as well as realigning some corners to improve visibility.
Wide centre lines, road markings and improved signage. And on the last one, for example, very significant keep left signage and the like, which of course isn't just for Kiwis but for the tourist drivers, which has had a lot of profile recently for good reason.
An Automobile Association spokesperson, Ken Moon, says the program is a good investment.
It would more than pay for itself. The cost of death and also the trauma that goes with that.
While there's praise for the program, some road safety advocates say more can still be done to keep drivers safe. The New Zealand director of the group Brake, Caroline Perry, says other measures vital to reducing road deaths and injuries, such as road policing, aren't receiving enough funding.
We've got a long way to go to reduce our road toll, and that includes not only investment in the roads themselves, but also around our speed limit, safe vehicle use, safer drivers as well. So there's still a lot more that we need to do.
Ken Shirley from the Road Transport Forum says livestock, forestry and dairy transporters are also heavy users of state highways. He says wire medians and roadside barriers won't stop a truck going across the centre line or off the road, and it's important for roads to be safe for them too.
Heavy vehicles have often different needs to light vehicles, and the message we're constantly passing on to NZTA is that when you're designing bridge approaches and the like, don't just do it from a car's perspective. Think about the heavy vehicles too, because the needs can be quite different.
Simon Bridges concedes the $600 million investment is only part of the solution to reducing deaths on the road. He says drivers will have to do their bit too. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
In the US, frustration with political paralysis over gun law reform has boiled over on the floor of the House of Representatives. A group of Democrat politicians are staging a sit-in demanding new laws that would keep military-style weapons out of the hands of mass killers. It comes after the US Senate voted down 4 bills on new gun controls introduced after 49 people were killed at an Orlando nightclub. Yiming Wu reports.
Democrats in Congress are refusing to leave the floor until Republicans agree to a vote on gun control legislation. The shooting on June 12th at a gay nightclub in Florida, where a gunman killed 49 people, has reignited the debate on the issue. Some gave speeches during the demonstration, including House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi and Ohio Democrat Timothy Ryan.
It is the Republican-led Congress that is preventing us from doing something that 90% of the American people want, 90% of gun owners want. It's the Republicans who won't allow this to happen.
In a move to shut down the protest, Republicans scheduled a vote on an issue unrelated to gun control. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan says he won't bend to the Democrats' demands, calling it a publicity stunt. Guns are a contentious political issue in the United States. Defenders for gun rights say they have a constitutional right to bear arms.
9.5 minutes to 6 after the 6 o'clock news. We are going back to the UK, but let's stay in New Zealand for the time being. Hunger and homelessness are being called the new normal for increasing numbers of New Zealanders. The Council of Christian Social Services Vulnerability Report out today says the government is dumping responsibility for these people on the charity sector while also starving it of funding. Here's our reporter Ruth Hill.
It's the strange case of the disappearing poor. At the height of the global financial crisis in 2010, taxpayers doled out nearly 600,000 emergency food grants, totalling more than $60 million. By last year, applications to work and income for food grants had dropped by nearly 30%. Yet at the same time, community groups are reporting rocketing demand for food parcels. Trevor McGlinchey from the Council for Christian Social Services says this strange contradiction could be explained by changes in government policy.
People are using up all of their applications, using up all of their eligibility at work and income, and then coming into social service providers. Or actually they don't feel comfortable even going to work and income and bypass them completely. But certainly the ongoing reports from our members is that the demand is high, remains high, and in some cases continues to grow.
He says demand for emergency and social housing is overwhelming, while tightening criteria for state housing has seen waiting lists slash from over 10,000 in 2009 to just 3,500 this year. The Council's president, Lisa Woolley, who also heads the Vision West Community Trust, says demand for housing has doubled in the last year, with her agency now fielding 150 inquiries a month. The agency has homes for 65 families and is building more, but can't keep up, which is why more people are living in cars, caravans, garages, or squashing in with family.
Our budgeters say that sometimes people are spending 75% of their income on housing. How do you feed your family? You go to a food bank.
The Salvation Army's Pam Waugh says demand on food banks was up 9% at the end of March compared with the year before, and services are bracing themselves for a long, hard winter. She says not only are social services dealing with more people, but more people with complex problems as government departments tighten access.
So things come out of that maybe 5-6 years ago we may have seen in child, youth and family. They're now in the NGO sector, so we're dealing with cases that we've had to upskill our staff a lot, we've had to change our staffing structures, we've had to staff to meet demand.
The Minister for Social Development and Holly declined to be interviewed today. However, in a written statement, a spokesman notes the number of applications for food grants has declined and the percentage approved has increased. He says the government currently invests $330 million of taxpayer money in the social services sector, but there is little evidence that it is effective in helping vulnerable people. For this reason, it's revamping the system to ensure it's targeted and makes a real difference for those in need. And it's this change that worries social service agencies, many of whom have not had a real funding increase in 8 years. The director of the Methodist Mission's Southern Operation, Laura Black, says restructuring usually means cuts before new funding kicks in.
So you've got agencies knowing that this is happening to them now, with all those financial stresses and future risk management stressors around the money, dealing with this client load, these people who urgently, desperately need help, and government agencies saying, well, we can't quite see the same group of people that you see.
The government is expected to release its new operating model for social services next month, with more detail later this year. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
Let's have some sport. Cycling. 2 New Zealand cyclists have now been confirmed to ride in next month's Tour de France. George Bennett of Nelson has been selected to ride for his Dutch Lotto team, joining Timaru's Shane Archbold, who was selected to ride for the German Bora Argonne team. Archbold and Bennett will become the 9th and 10th riders to take part in cycling's classic event. There could be as many as 5 New Zealanders riding the Tour de France, which starts in 10 days. Barry Guy spoke with Archbold, the 2014 Commonwealth Games scratch race champion, and asked him how his Tour de France selection rates in his pretty illustrious career.
Obviously, when I was a track rider, the pinnacle was the Olympics, so I ticked that box, and the pinnacle of road racing is the Tour de France. I mean, not just in the cycling, and in most sports, it's ranked in the top 10 or 20 hardest races you could possibly do. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a tough month, but it's all exciting.
I suppose there were a number of cyclists in your team that were hoping to get in that squad for the Tour de France. What do you think got you through?
Yeah, our team's made up 21 riders, and obviously they only take 9. And our team, well, most other teams are 25 to 30 riders, but ours is a bit smaller because we're not actually at the World Tour level, so we have less riders and we don't do the Tour of Italy and Tour of Spain and races like that. So pretty much I was always in with a chance at the start of the year, but I just went about my thing and raced as per usual. And then as the time got closer, the chance got higher. And then in the last sort of 6 to 7 weeks, I've really concentrated on trying to prove my case to be named in the tour team and lose a little bit of weight so I could climb in the Alps a little bit easier. And yeah, it's all paid off. I had a race last week in France, and that was sort of the final selection race for me. So yeah, it's all worked out pretty well.
What's going to be the most difficult part, do you think? I mean, it's 3 weeks. You've got to get up plenty of hills, all that sort of thing. Have you thought about what the most challenging part's going to be?
I've talked to a few riders, obviously, over the years about the Tour de France, and firstly, the biggest hurdle for everyone is getting through the first week. It's the biggest race in the world. The roads are full of spectators. Everyone wants to prove their hand and get a result. So that means generally a lot of nervousness within the peloton and a lot of crashes. So after sort of 6 or 7 days, if you've got through that reasonably unscathed, that's when the racing settles down and the GC riders, the overall contenders, start to put up their hands, and that's when the mountains start. And that's probably my biggest thing. I'll thrive the first week, all the nervousness and speed and the bunch sprints, and then as the mountains start to come, I'll start to get weary because my longest race so far is only 8 days. So sort of anything after that's going to be a new experience for me, and especially once I think we spend 5 days in the Pyrenees first, couple of transition days, and then 5 or 6 in the Alps. So it's a lot of climbing, but I'll be taking it one day at a time. I'll look at the race manual only one day at a time, because if I get too far ahead, I'll just get confused and carried away. So it's easier just get through day one and then find out what's in store for day 2.
That is Barry Guy speaking with Shane Archbold, who's off to tour France. Last night on Checkpoint, we looked at the business case for Compass getting the food contracts in the country's hospitals. This was sold enthusiastically by Health Benefits Limited, a now defunct government agency charged with reducing costs in the health system. Health Benefits pitched a Compass takeover of food provision to the country's DHB as being worth about $155 million to $190 million over the 15-year term of the proposed agreement. Now, that's in cost reductions, worth having. But are we having it? Because that figure was based on a national contract that includes all 20 DHBs. Only 9 DHBs currently use Compass, and just 6 of them have signed the 15-year deal. Checkpoint has been told that unless all 20 sign up, the savings won't get anywhere near the figure of $190 million. One DHB has told Checkpoint they feel under real pressure to sign now with Compass. Meanwhile, Eileen Goodwin of the Otago Daily Times has revealed that district health boards were in Wellington last week where they were grilled on whether they'll join the Compass food contract. So, are DHBs under pressure? Will Compass achieve the savings that were a key selling point of their contract and sounded really good at up to $190 million? What are the cost reductions the government now hopes to achieve? These are big questions. This is public money. We wanted to ask Compass that. They declined to be interviewed, so we went to the Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, and his office told us he was too busy to appear on Checkpoint. We will keep looking at this story and we will keep trying to find out exactly how much now is being saved, given that fewer than half the DHBs have signed up to this Compass contract. The time is 10 minutes to 6, so in 5 seconds' time we will have the splendour of the Radio New Zealand Pips. Kia ora everyone, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National, on the radio as always, screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the RNZ website. However you're doing so, thank you for joining us. In the next half hour, the UK is waking up at 7 o'clock there to its historic vote on the future of the country. Will they stay in the EU? We're going to go live to London. We talked to a New Zealander who has first-hand experience of being kidnapped in Nigeria. This has just happened to a group, including 1 New Zealander and 3 Australians, and the Christchurch writer who features on a literary sculpture. A lovely interview coming up. All of that and more in the next 29 and a half minutes. But first, here's the news with Sharon Brett Kelly.
Kia ora, good evening. A man who distributed Islamic State material that included videos of a beheading lashed out and yelled as he was jailed at the Auckland District Court today. Imran Patel was jailed for 3 years and 9 months for possessing, making and distributing the objectionable material. Edward Gay was in court and told Checkpoint the judge said it was the first case of its kind where someone has been prosecuted for violent videos.
Judge Collins said that although the violence depicted in the videos was some distance from New Zealand, as a district court judge who has to deal with the damage done to so many lives on a daily basis, and to see this extreme violence glorified and celebrated in the way that these videos do, he said it was a real serious concern and it had to be denounced by the court.
Edward Gay said as he was led into the cells, Patel shouted to the media to tell the Prime Minister John Key to stop being a slave to America and get out of Iraq. The government says it would not pay a ransom for the New Zealander being held hostage in Nigeria. The mining contractor, who has been named in local media as Jamal Khan, was among 7 people abducted by gunmen on the outskirts of the city of Calabar yesterday. The Prime Minister John Key says it is not uncommon in that part of the world for people to be kidnapped for money.
Our very strong policy is not to pay ransom, and the reason for that is we think that if we paid a ransom, we potentially put a bounty on the head of any New Zealander that travels to a dangerous part of the world and potentially makes the situation worse. So in case of the New Zealand government, no, we wouldn't pay.
John Key says the government will do everything it can to support the New Zealander and their safe release. A former top public servant says the State Services Commission has failed to take responsibility for publishing an unfair and flawed report criticising 2 senior employees. The Ombudsman says the Paula Rebstock inquiry ordered by the Commission contained unfair criticisms of one of the public servants, Derek Leask, and some evidence did not fairly represent his actions. The Rebstock inquiry was investigating leaks in 2012 about a now abandoned restructure at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A former chief executive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Neil Walter, says he's disappointed by the response from the State Services Commissioner Ian Rennie. Mr Rennie says they could have dealt with Mr Leask better, but says he doesn't agree with all elements of the Ombudsman's findings. Neil Walter says Mr Rennie isn't taking the Ombudsman's criticism seriously. The European Commission President has warned Britain it will not be able to renegotiate the terms of its European Union membership after it votes whether to remain in or leave the group. Polls have opened for more than 46 million British voters. Jean-Claude Juncker says the Prime Minister David Cameron has already got the best deal on offer from the EU.
We have concluded a deal with the Prime Minister. He got the maximum he could receive and we gave the maximum we could give, so there will be no kind of renegotiation. Out is out.
Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission. The Automobile Association says an extra $360 million to make black spots on rural roads safer will pay for itself in the lives it saves. The Minister Simon Bridges announced the package today, which he says will be spent on improving more than 90 high-risk spots in 14 regions. Along with already allocated money, the total spend will be $600 million over 6 years. It'll be used to improve visibility, install safety barriers and make road marking and signage better. And the AA's Mike Noon says that will make a difference.
This will help because, of course, it's on those faster roads where you do get the fatalities, either the vehicle running off the road, a single vehicle run off, or you get the head-on.
Mike Noon. The government is forecasting the program will result in 900 fewer deaths and serious injuries over the next 10 years. Democratic Party members are continuing to press their demands for tighter gun controls and refusing to leave the floor of the lower house of the United States Congress. They're calling for the House of Representatives to remain in session instead of taking a planned recess next week to discuss new legislation following the shootings at a gay nightclub in Florida. 12 hours into the protest, the Republican Speaker Paul Ryan was shouted down as he attempted to resume normal proceedings.
But the chair would hope that the business of the House could be conducted in a fashion that respects positively on the dignity and the decorum of this institution to which we all belong.
Paul Ryan called the sit-in a publicity stunt. To sport now, and the Wales coach Warren Gatland says he's surprised by George Moala's inclusion in the All Blacks for the final test in Dunedin on Saturday. Moala will start in the number 13 jersey ahead of Seta Tamanivalu as cover for the injured Malakai Fekitoa, I should say. Saturday's test will be Moala's second in the black jersey, and Gatland says he didn't expect the 25-year-old to start.
For them, they want to give players a chance, and without too many disruptions, they've made some subtle changes and try to keep the continuity of their squad together and to bring players in. So, it's an All Black team. It's going to be tough.
Warren Gatland. The All Blacks have an unassailable 2-0 series lead heading into Saturday's test. Irish football fans are celebrating after they qualified for the knockout stage of the European Championship for the first time. Ireland beat Italy 1-0 in their final group match to set up a last 16 clash with host France. Goal scorer Robbie Brady admits it was an emotional day.
What a moment for everyone involved. We said it that we were going to do a job for everyone that came out here today, and we did it. We made history into the next 16 and we need to regroup and go again, but what a fantastic night, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted with it all.
Northern Ireland is also in the last 16 and they'll play Wales. In the other games, Switzerland play Poland, Croatia meets Portugal, Germany is up against Slovakia, Hungary play Belgium, Italy will have to beat Spain and England play Iceland. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the surgery of Dr. Peter Walker, the only man in the country able to carry out sex change operations. He's turned over 60 men into women during his career. But who will do it now he's about to retire? Simon Morris looks forward to the International Film Festival, and this week's cultural ambassador Miles Buckingham remembers when Jamaican dancehall music turned spiritual or political, or maybe both, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Showers, some heavy, becoming isolated this afternoon, then clearing overnight or tomorrow morning. Waikato to Kapiti, including the Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms in the west north of Kapiti, easing tomorrow and gradually clearing. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, but the odd showers spreading from the ranges today. Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, rain clearing this afternoon and fine breaks developing. Bulla and northern Westland, rain easing to showers this afternoon, clearing tomorrow, but cloudy periods remaining. Southern Westland and Fiordland, a few showers clearing later today, fine tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, rain gradually retreating to the coast and clearing overnight, fine tomorrow. Southland, mainly fine, but a few showers this evening and overnight. Chatham Islands, rain or showers, heavy at times.
Mainly fine, but a few showers this evening and
I
overnight.
know, we're covering...
So that's not mainly fine.
No, we're covering all the bases there. Well, it is winter, I suppose.
Thanks,
and I was going to say, it's 9 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much. So if it's 9 minutes past 6, that means the polls have been open for 9 minutes in the UK. This extraordinary Brexit vote. Should Britain stay? It's fascinating. Should Britain stay in the European Union or branch out on its own? The referendum could go down to the wire, with opinion polls showing the country is really evenly split. It's only the third nationwide referendum in the UK history and comes after a 4-month battle for votes between the Leave and Remain campaigns. It's been pretty pitched. Very much in the Remain camp, David Cameron spent yesterday urging voters to make their vote count.
Please give it everything you've got in these last hours to make sure that people go out and vote tomorrow. Go out and vote Remain. Go out and vote Remain for a bigger, better Britain inside a reformed European Union. Stronger, safer, better off. A day to go. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Sounding fairly exhausted there, David Cameron. The former Mayor the former London Mayor Boris Johnson, who is also very much part of that Tory camp, made the most of every last moment of campaigning too, but for the other side.
The ideal position for us is to take back control tomorrow of huge amounts of money so we can spend it on our priorities, take back control of our immigration system, take back control fundamentally of our democracy. That's what this is all about for me. It's about our chance as a nation once again to stand on our own 2 feet, not rely on Brussels.
Boris Johnson will have more from London. In fact, let's go to London right now because I think our correspondent Catherine Drew is there. Catherine, you are assuming the position. It's nice to have you with us, Catherine. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me, Catherine? It's John here in New Zealand. Can you hear me? No. We're going to go back to Catherine. I think we might Catherine was just racing into position. It is only 10 past 7 in the morning in London. Really fascinating, this story. So we'll cross to Catherine the moment we have established contact with her. We are going to go now, though, to Nigeria. Prime Minister John Campbell says the government will not pay a ransom for a New Zealander kidnapped in Nigeria. The New Zealander, whom Nigerian media are naming as Jamal Khan, was abducted along with 3 Australians. We think Jamal is very much an expat Kiwi now living in Australia. New Zealander Bruce Klenner was an oil worker in Nigeria who was taken hostage at gunpoint in 2007. So, at the beginning anyway, a very similar experience. Mr. Klenner was working for the Lone Star Drilling Company on Shell oil exploration platforms in the Niger Delta when he and a colleague were kidnapped and held along with 3 colleagues for 7 days before their negotiated release. In other words, this was a ransom hostage situation that did end with a deal done. Earlier this afternoon, I asked him to describe what happened.
Well, we were taken by gunpoint, so to speak. No, they actually come up the river on boats, on speedboats they call them, and we had security there, and they had a bit of a firefight and like general purpose machine guns and things like that. And then they ended up actually we go into a lockdown position, and like we had big steel doors and everything like that, and it was my job to go around and bolt all those, secure them, and then we go into the inner accommodation, so to speak, and they actually used explosives to blow the doors off. Yeah. then there was quite a bit of shooting and things going on, but
I can't believe you're laughing about this now, because at the time it must have been all kinds of terrifying, was it?
oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah, it was, well, you know, like they were shooting through the door, and so we were sort of like on the floor in this, the shower and the bedroom type area, and I guess I was just thinking, well, is this the last thing I'm going to see? You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely
This
unbelievable.
is how it's going to end.
Yeah. The bizarre thing is, Bruce, and forgive me for putting this in financial terms, but actually your value to them was alive. So they were being pretty reckless, weren't they? Because if they were going to ransom you, they needed you in one piece, didn't they?
That's correct, yeah. But even when they took us outside, once they had us all under control, once they marched us outside, there was still fighting going on. There was still bullets and things going on. Yeah.
And
So,
this was a criminal gang. I mean, this was a business transaction for them, was it?
yeah, this was MED, M-E-A-D. I can't pronounce it. I can't remember their full affiliation at the time. It was MED. It was an organised Delta operation.
And so basically they kidnap people, ransom them off, and make money out of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And from what also I understand, they were able to get their second in command out of prison as well.
Because the other alternative in this region, or they're in a different part of the country, is Boko Haram, and there are no circumstances in which you want to be anywhere near those guys, are there?
Oh, no way. No, you wouldn't want to be taken by them.
No. So how did you get out? Who negotiated in the end? Who does the work? How does that happen?
From what I understand, John, there was some English hostage negotiators involved, from what I understand, and they would have been dealing with possibly the company I was working for, and for the governor, most probably, of the state, perhaps at the time. Yeah.
And what's happening to you guys while the negotiations are going on, which of course you wouldn't know about? You would have no way of understanding what was happening. Where are you held and who are you held by?
We're still held by MED, and we were on a camp, so to speak. I know when we coming off the river, they actually had dugouts in the banks, on the river banks, so to speak, and they would have been about 4.5 feet deep, I suppose. They'd dig out something like a man would stand up, and then they'd just have a tin roof over top, and they'd have their guns. It was quite fortified area. It was a proper camp, guerrilla camp, so to speak, I suppose you'd call it.
And how did they treat you when you were in this guerrilla camp?
Not too bad, like they didn't harm us as such, but there was a few scary moments there. There was one afternoon there where another outfit tried to come and get us.
What, a rival criminal gang after you for the same reasons?
I would say so, John. Yeah, that would come under. We had the commander, or the guy that was in charge of the guerrilla group, the head honcho. He was. We were just sitting in the shack type thing, and he was talking with us, and then he got quite serious with us, and we had to lay down on the floor, and he levelled his gun out at us, not to say anything, move or do anything. It was pretty bit unnerving. And then you could hear all this other gunfire carrying on, yeah.
Bruce, I can't even begin to imagine that. I mean, you're a long way from home. In fact, it's hard to be further from home. You are in the care of people who want to ransom you off, but really don't have terribly much to lose if they don't. It must have been horrific.
Yeah, it was pretty full on, John. Basically, I just set my mindset was, I'm going to be here for 3 months at least. That was my mindset. That's what I tuned myself in for. I guess I just turned myself off, I suppose, to a certain degree. It wasn't. You never really slept properly. We just slept on the timber floor, basically. I think they might have had a real thin ass mattress for us, but that's about it.
And when they actually quite quickly, when the deal was done and you were released, how did that take place? Where were you dropped? Where were you taken to? How did you actually leave their captivity?
We were put on a boat again, because there's all rivers up there, and then we were taken to, I think it was a Shell military complex, and from there we were helicoptered to the governor's mansion. Yeah, that was something else, I tell you. That's a whole completely another story. Then they wanted the security police were wanting to take us away individually, because we were in the kitchen, in this big kitchen. And I says, no, I'm not going anywhere with anybody. We're all staying together. You can go jump in the bloody lake. Yeah. And they wanted, did we know who they were, or names and things like that? And I said, no. Didn't know no one. No names, no nothing. Because you don't know who's tied up with who, you see.
No. And so almost a decade on, that was 2007, so almost a decade on, it looks like some Kiwis and Aussies, well, one Kiwi anyway, expat Kiwi, and some Aussies are in the same predicament. What did you think when you heard that?
Oh, bloody hell. I just hope that, he's with whoever he's been taken with, good people, level-headed, no heroes. You got to be pretty calm, I think. You got to accept the situation, and I was fortunate enough. The guys that I was taken with were all good people, good minds.
Right. So you don't want to antagonise the people.
No.
You've got to be calm and just keep your head down.
Yeah, that's it.
Bruce Klenner, who survived the experience of being taken hostage in fairly similar circumstances to what's happened overnight in Nigeria and made it home to New Zealand. Will Britain leave the EU? It is the day for that decision to be made. Let's cross back now to our London correspondent, Catherine Drew. Catherine, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Good morning to you. Or good afternoon, good evening.
Yeah, well, no, good morning to you, because your day is much more important than ours, because so much is going to be decided today. There's quite a long delay, so I'm just really going to let you tell us, first of all, about what's in the papers there, because, of course, we know Murdoch and lots of the papers have come down on the side of Brexit. What are they saying, and what are the polls picking?
Well, let me start with the polls firstly, because the polls still have the competition at pretty much a dead heat. There's really statistically nothing in it. In the past few days, the Remain camp have been edging ahead just slightly, and we've seen a recovery in the British pound against major currencies. But there's still statistically, with a 3% margin of error, there's nothing in it. What it will come down to is that 11% or so, 12% of undecided voters. And those were the people that the campaigners yesterday, both for Leave and Remain, were desperately trying to reach. Let's have a look at the newspapers. Well, the first one, The Sun, as you mentioned, from the Murdoch stable, Independence Day, it declares. And this is a phrase that former London Mayor Boris Johnson used for the first time just a couple of days ago. But of course, it really took off. Independence Day, there we are. The sun's coming up on a new Great Britain, urging people, of course, to go ahead and vote to leave the European Union. So the Times, a day of reckoning. Look at that. There it has the lights of Europe and the lights of Britain. And here a copy of what people will be faced with. They can choose remain a member of the European Union, tick the box, or leave the European Union. Pretty simple decision there. Of course, the ramifications both personally, professionally for them, business-wise, huge, of course. But look at that. It's pretty clear. The Times would advocate we stay in Europe. Funnily enough, The Guardian has something of a similar picture as well. Who do we want to be, it asks. The Guardian, of course, coming down on the side that we should remain part of the European Union. It says, after the most bitter political campaign in living memory, a nation decides. And it really has been a new level of political discourse that we've reached, not in a good way, of course. And let's take a look finally at the Financial Times, a much more measured approach, of course, from the Pink newspaper. Tension mounts in City ahead of historic vote on EU referendum. And there we have a not particularly flattering picture of Boris Johnson and David Cameron looking much calmer. And the FT, of course, has come down on the side of remaining. Of course, it has business interests. It caters to a business audience. So businesses, large business particularly, overwhelmingly voting, wanting people to vote to remain within the EU. Smaller businesses are more mixed, pretty evenly divided. So that's how the newspapers are looking this morning.
Gosh, it's fascinating, isn't it? They're rather unlikely bedfellows, The Guardian and the FT. So there is Liberal report for remaining, Big Business report for remaining. Obviously, the tabloids, lots of them have come down on the side of leaving. Is there a sense, though, that people's minds have been made up for a very long time? That basically not many decisions have changed. It's just simply the undecideds who are going to go into the booth and make their minds up today?
Oh, certainly. It will all come down to these undecided voters. Now, so of course, people have been paying attention, and we've had endless campaigning and endless debates and all these figures flying around that people have been bombarded with. One side will say something, the other side will counter it. Experts will be raised on both sides. So certainly the British people know the argument. It will come down to those 11...
Bugger. Oh, well, Catherine Drew out of London. We just lost her. Maybe she's going off to vote, but I think that was a technical glitch rather than the fact that she'd got up out of the chair. It really is fascinating, this Brexit referendum. So by this time tomorrow, unless it's basically tied and they're waiting for special votes or postal votes or whatever, we will know the result and we will cover it at length. And we do promise as much as we can that there won't be technical dropouts while we do so. Catherine Drew live from London until she disappeared without trace. It's 25.5 minutes past 6. The owner of a dive school plans to take legal action against the school's former owners after being asked to repay nearly $1.5 million to the Tertiary Education Commission. An investigation found the School of Commercial Diver Training student enrolments between 2009 and 2014 simply couldn't be validated. And 2 of the school's courses ran for a shorter time than they were funded for. What was going on here? Michael Kropp's been looking at this.
Intuiri Education, which owns 20 private training organisations, bought the dive school in March 2013. Its 2 main courses on 30-metre and 50-metre deep diving were funded as 18 and 10-week courses respectively. In reality, they were much shorter. The 30-metre course consistently ran for less than 12 weeks between 2009 and 2014. The 50-metre fared worse, dropping to just over half of its funded hours in 2013 and 2014. Tim Fowler, the Chief Executive of the Tertiary Education Commission, says nobody can get away with that.
There's no way to justify that whatsoever, and as soon as that information's come to our attention, we've gone away and investigated that in depth and have actually gone about the process of ascertaining that clearly they were under-delivering, and that's the reason why we're now recovering the money.
Mr Fowler says the investigation also found errors in the school's enrolment numbers. According to an Ernst & Young report which Intuiri Education commissioned, the dive school received funding for 45 non-existent students between 2009 and 2014, and a further 46 course records couldn't be validated. Rob Facer, Intuiri's chief executive and a director of the school, says those discrepancies relate to the previous owner, and there was no way Intuiri could have known about them until it started managing the school in 2014.
Some things are very, very difficult to identify even through the most rigorous of due diligence, and it's only when you are in the driver's seat, for want of a better term, that you're able to truly understand exactly what goes on and how things are done.
He says the problems were only found through internal reviews and audit, and it will pay the money back to the Tertiary Education Commission by the end of August. Mr Facer says Intuiri plans to take legal action against the former owners. Another tertiary provider, Quantum Education, under the Intuiri Group, is also being investigated by the Commission. Earlier this year, it was the subject of a serious fraud office inquiry. David Cunliffe, the Labour Party's Associate Education spokesperson, says the school was able to get away with the rort for far too long.
These rorts were going on since 2009, and it's now 2016 that the government's finally caught up with it and done something about it. We think the system's broken, and it takes that long to find and fix what's a very, very obvious rort.
Mr Cunliffe says although he's not a lawyer, there should be prosecutions when an institution's been found to have deliberately conducted fraudulent activity. For Checkpoint, Michael Kropp.
Well, the time is just coming up to 29 minutes past 6, which means we don't have time to bring you a really lovely story by Belinda McCammon on Apirana Taylor, a wonderful writer who has been selected to feature on one of 15 literary sculptures that will be part of a multi-million-dollar Otakaro Avon River development. We will put that up online immediately. It's a really lovely story and we recommend you track it down, and apologies to both Apirana and Belinda. Feedback on Paula Rebstock. Basically, people are saying if she's paid out of the public purse, then she should front up and be accountable for the inquiry that she was paid to run, especially if it's been found to be seriously flawed. Her failure to respond to RNZ's request for an interview today makes me wonder if she has something to hide. Lots of people wondering why Dame Paula is not fronting, because this was a public report, a lot of money spent on it, and as the Ombudsman Ron Patterson pointed out, it did do some pretty serious damage to the reputation of the man identified as, well, at the heart of the leak. Wrongly, as it turned out. Thank you for your feedback, by the way. Thank you for listening. It's wonderful to have your company. That is Checkpoint for this evening, Thursday evening. Brexit tomorrow in depth. We hope to see you or talk to you at 5 tomorrow night. Until then, have a lovely evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. An Auckland court has jailed a man who distributed Islamic State material for almost 3 years and 9 months. The government says it will not pay a ransom for a New Zealander who's been kidnapped in Nigeria. People in Britain are beginning to vote in a referendum on the country's membership of the European Union. The Automobile Association says an extra $360 million to make rural roads safer will pay for itself in the lives it saves. Our next news and weather at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, the polls open in Britain's historic Brexit referendum, a sit-in by politicians in the US Congress, and Japan grapples